afternoon and welcome to another engaging edition of Time with Piac. We are glad to have you join us for today's important conversation on accountability check, our Piac's recommendations being implemented. I am Jessica, a champion. So the Public Interest and Accountability Committee, Piac, plays a key role in ensuring transparency and accountability in the management and use of Ghana's petroleum revenues. Through its annual report, Piac provides independent assessments of how petroleum revenues are utilized and makes recommendations aimed at improving governance efficiency and value for money. These recommendations are also intended to strengthen systems and ensure that Ghana's oil and gas resources deliver real and sustainable benefits to citizens. However, a critical question remains: how well are these recommendations being implemented by the relevant institutions? So today's discussion will take a closer look at this issue. We will explore the progress made so far, identify challenges affecting implementation, and reflect on what more needs to be done to ensure that recommendations translate into real action and impact. So note that this conversation is not only for policymakers and stakeholders, but also for you, our online audience. Your participation is therefore very important. So we encourage you to send your questions or your comments throughout the program, and we'll respond to them. So joining me today for this conversation is Mr. Samuel Bekwe, and he is the chair of the technical subcommittee of Piac. So thank you for tuning in to Time with Piac, and we start our conversation now. So hello, Mr. Bekwe, good afternoon, and welcome to Time with Piac.
Good afternoon, and I hope all our viewers and listeners, our followers, very sure they're going to have a very good interaction today.
Yes, because when it comes to Piac's recommendations, one thing that people normally keep talking about is that you keep repeating your recommendations. Are you not tired? I'm sure in the course of the conversation, we'll get to respond to that. But we would want to start off our conversation with what role that Piac exactly plays when it comes to petroleum revenue management.
Great. The Public Interest and Accountability Committee is an oversight body. And let me say, it is an external oversight body on our petroleum revenue management as a country. When we say external oversight, it means that it is not part of a core government agency that have been set up and staffed under government and also under the direction of a government. Rather, it is a representation of civil society organizations, professional bodies, civil society in general, our traditional leaders. And so the appointment, the work that Piac does is completely independent from what government also does. So Piac has that particular independence to exert their oversight responsibility by ensuring that they achieve their three core mandates. And we've always repeated these mandates, but we want our viewers to continue to understand the mandate. The first one is Piac is able to check government agencies to ensure they are implementing what the Petroleum Revenue Management Act requires them to implement. So we say we are a check on government agencies in the implementation of the various policies, the various budget requirements, and any other recommendations that government may receive as well. The second part is Piac create a platform for what we term as the public debate platform. We create a platform, and one of it is even this particular Time with Piac. Comment by our followers are sometimes taken and also relayed to government, particularly after we have sift through to sieve through and ensure that these comments are very relevant. So we create both physical online presence for citizens to view their, to relay what they think petroleum revenue management could be, or what we could do to improve how the revenues from petroleum sector is utilized. And so when we go to our regions, our district, we create that town hall meetings, that platform to take feedback from citizens. That's the second mandate. The third mandate is after implementation of certain policies for some time, Piac is required to do what we call an independent assessment, meaning the assessment should not be influenced by government, it should not be influenced by anybody. Piac is able to do that technically, based on theory, based on technical requirement, and be able to inform and advise government that we have been going this side, but we believe that based on what has happened, the dynamics in the sector, we need to change it to this side. And so that is the third mandate that Piac has been implementing. So that is the role of Piac when it comes to petroleum revenue management.
We know that the recommendations are maybe the aftermath, or they are captured in your statutory reports. So in the grand scheme of things, how do you think, or how do you rate public awareness of what you do, especially your recommendations?
The ratings of public awareness, I think Piac has done a very good job. It is quite tough for you to understand. If you take about 100 persons, we believe that almost 1/3 of Ghanaians, every per 100 Ghanaians, would confirm that they have heard of Piac before. And remember, we have a growing population. The youth is more. So there are people who are coming from younger age, teenage age, who may not have heard of Piac, because we need to continue to do the awareness. In terms of our recommendations, when we do our report, the recommendations are required to shape policy going forward. The recommendations are required to correct government whenever we think they are not doing the right thing. The recommendations are required, and after it has been gleaned from international best practices, they are required to help government to efficiently put to good use the petroleum revenues that we receive. Unfortunately, these are mere recommendations that we give to the public and government. Do we have what it takes to ensure the recommendations are implemented? I would say we do not have the legal mandate to crack the whip. Rather, we have adopted a moral suasion approach to work with our partners, the ministries in charge of the management of the petroleum revenues, and the ministries who receive petroleum revenues in terms of as part of their budget to spend. And the moral suasion has been, we work with them to say these recommendations will improve whatever you do. So why don't you consider them? And so if you look at our total recommendations since 2012, 2011, our first report, about 31% of that recommendations have been duly implemented. Whilst among the 31, there are a few of them that is still being implemented because it's a continuous implementation. Is it a failure? That's a big question.
I was actually going to ask you that.
Because we don't have the legislative backing to act like Public Accounts Committee or act like a law court, 31% is a big number to say as a success. That's why I gave a condition. If we had the law that says that if you don't implement your recommendation, Piac will sanction you as a ministry. It could be any sanction, including you may not receive petroleum revenue subsequent years if you don't implement the recommendations. Then we will be expecting no less than 80 to 90% implementation of or success rate. Mm-hmm. But because we do not have that legal backing to crack the whip, 31% through moral suasion is quite significant.
I think that's according to your market scheme, but we'll give our viewers the opportunity to also let us know what their rating of a 31% implementation status is. Sami says that you can count it as success, but what do you also think? 31% out of 100, is it a failure or a success? That's a question that we are leaving to our viewers, but we'll continue with our conversation. You can drop your answers in the comments, and then I'll tell Sami before he leaves what our viewers think of the 31% implementation. So Sami, I would want you to just walk us through some of your recommendations over the years. I'm sure it will be from 2011 to the most recent reports that we have, the 2025.
I would focus on some of the key ones.
Yes.
When we started the publication of report as the Public Interest and Accountability Committee, we had immediately noted certain gaps in the Petroleum Revenue Management Act. And as a result of that, we were able to make certain recommendations to amend that particular law. And the amendment was in 2015. Some of the key things that amendments that we had suggested was before petroleum revenues that we received from the sale of our carried and participating interest, or the sale of our royalties and royalties and carried and participating interest, our interest in the field, would have gone to GMPC's account before GMPC would have taken how much they are due before they deposit the rest to the PHF. We suggested to the minister by then, I remember it was Minister Tepe, and that was changed because for good governance sake, it is always important for the money to be deposited in the Petroleum Holding Fund, and we use the right budget and procedures to redistribute those funds. And so that particular changes was very, very critical. Okay. Further, another change within the Petroleum Revenue Management Act that we had effected was the fact that Piac ourselves did not have any revenue source in terms of how it would be funded. And in 2015, we were able to work with the government to put Piac under the petroleum, the ABFA. And so we were able to receive, our monies were coming from the petroleum revenues, though we didn't have any percentage of how much we would get, but at least we were funded directly from the petroleum revenues. There were other changes that we made. I think it was to do with some errors in the previous law. Initially, we would have taken 70% of ABFA, of the petroleum revenue, the benchmark revenue for ABFA. But in the new changes we had in 2015, we said a maximum of 70% so that we are not tempted to spend everything. And so we believe as Piac, we had made those recommendations and they were taken in 2015. Another important one that we had made was the fact that the salt pond oil field, we had called for the decommissioning of the salt pond oil field because we knew that the production numbers they were reporting were far lower than how much we had expected and investment we had put in place. And so one of our recommendations was the minister and GMPC to move ahead to decommission salt pond, and that was taken. Okay. And they started decommissioning. Even though today, as we speak, there is still decommissioning of salt pond. It's been more than 10 years. Our recommendations have changed today on decommissioning of salt pond to say it should end as soon as possible. We don't want any further budget going into salt pond decommissioning.
But is 10 years a realistic timeline for a decommissioning to be done?
It should have been done earlier. Okay. But for our recommendations in 2015, I think it started. Okay. So that was good for us. The third that we can talk about is the fact that in 2015, there was a global crisis. And as a result, we had issues with production. And with that issues with production, GMPC lost a lot of revenues. But their partners, which is Jubilee Partners, had acquired loss of production insurance, which means they relied on that particular insurance. And so by 2019, we had actually spoken to GMPC, and they had acquired what we call the loss of production insurance cover. And I think till now, if there is going to be any unforeseen circumstances, GMPC will be able to rely on that particular insurance.
Okay.
Let me speak about one more, and I think that is also quite important. I think it has to do with the fact that some of our recommendations, though they have not been fully implemented, some of them are in the pipeline that we believe, if implemented, it will help. And one of the key ones have been where we have advised government that any changes to the PRMA should be holistic.
Sure.
Government, in our initial discussion with government, they have attempted to say, yes, any further changes to the PRMA, they are going to ensure that it is well consulted. Stakeholder-wise, they will consider more stakeholders before they make those changes to the PRMA. Yes.
So let's move from 2011 gradually. Let's settle on 2025, which is the latest reports that Piac issued. What are some of the recommendations from that particular report?
There were multiple recommendations we've made. One of the key ones is that Ghana has been experiencing a consistent decline in petroleum production. And a recommendation we have given is that there is a need for the government to have a strategy in terms of, there are 3-point strategy Piac has provided. First, a strategy to bring in new investors. And in this time, we should be targeting we call them the big wigs, the big companies, the ExxonMobils, the Shell, the Chevrons, who have over the years built consistent technology and built experiences operating in deep waters, because most of our blocks in the Decatur, Accra, and Central Basin are somewhat deep waters. If we're able to bring them, it will help. But how can they bring them? Piac has recommended that the fiscal regime that is covering the Western Basin, if it's going to be deep waters, we should have a differentiated fiscal regime so that we can use to attract them. We are giving this recommendation also in the view of energy transition, which is imminent. So we have to ramp up our production now, and that means we bring in new investors. Also, our 10 field has been very difficult, including major further investments that have been made in 10 field, but production has largely declined. We haven't gotten what we expected from the 10 field. Our suggestion is government should do a comprehensive assessment of the 10 field. If it requires further investment, they should let Ghanaians know that this is what it will require to put it back into efficient field or prolific field. If not, what we should do would be, we have to look at the 10 field and probably convert it into a gas dominant field, because we've seen a lot of gas coming out of 10, and do more drilling to tie in different wells to be able to reduce the complexity of that particular field. If we don't do that, we will continue to see the decline. Similar applies to even Talu, Jubilee. We need to further do investment, drill more wells to continue to sustain that particular field. It's important. The very last one is, how do we get most of those companies that have declared discovery for more than 5-6 years to move into production? I think we have to force it out of their hands to move into production. If they are not able to and ready, we should take those fields. We have the right in the law. We should take those fields once they miss the deadline and give it to companies that are serious and want to come and help us increase our production. Other recommendation, I'll talk about one more. One more recommendation that I would like to talk about is government. That's also borders on revenue management. Government has decided to spend all our petroleum revenues in the Accra-Kumasi Expressway. We are calling for a big transparency when it comes to the scope of the project. We are calling for the contractors that win the project, because that's petroleum revenue. Piac will be monitoring. And I want the finance minister to know this. Piac is going to monitor that particular project, because everywhere oil revenue is spent, Piac is there. And so we can also serve as an additional oversight for the government. Before you pay a contractor, you can rely on Piac report as well to know whether the contractor has done the job or not. And the very last one is Esploco, GMPC Esploco owes Ghana. We are calling them that they have not accounted for over $600 million of petroleum revenues that have gone to them. And so we are sounding a warning to Esploco. For us, Piac, part of our mandate, the only thing we can do is to use the legal means to get the Attorney General to declare whether those monies are legal or illegal, and so that we can push Esploco to account for those monies.
But Mr. Bekwai, over time, we realized that Piac is urging, Piac calls on, Piac reiterates, Piac admonishes. Is that the only extent to which you can go as far as your recommendations are concerned? Because I'm sure we would have over 100 recommendations made over the last 15 years of Piac being in existence. And we keep hearing these words which really do not carry weight or do not give us the impacts that we are looking for. So is Piac satisfied with just recommending and then that is it?
We can say that Piac themselves are not satisfied. Citizens always call us to get the necessary legislation to ensure that Piac can bite. That's what they use the word. I think there are other things we can do. Partnering with civil society organizations to sue government and relevant agencies. Partnering with government or state level accountability bodies, SHRAJ, IOCO, and law enforcement agencies, even the OSP, to ensure that if we found any information that doesn't bode well with us, we can share that information with them. Partner with the Auditor General, particularly when we go for project inspections, and we notice that contractors have done a very bad job. The Auditor General has the right to be able to surcharge. I think we need to partner with them. So we have to partner with those bodies that have the legal basis and the mandate to be able to crack the whip, so that we can work with them and our findings may be dealt with through them. That is until we Piac are able to fight for similar mandates. That is what we have to do.
Very well. So I would want us to talk about some challenges or bottlenecks when it comes to the implementation. So 31 out of 100, which means there's a deficit, for want of a better word, for about 69%, if my maths is right. So 31 plus 69 will give us 100. So we have 69% not implemented or not attended.
Recommendations, yes.
69% of your recommendations not implemented or not given any attention. Let me put it that way. What do you think is really the cause? Is it an issue of political will on the part of those who are supposed to implement your recommendations? Is it an issue of institutional capacity? And I'm sure you've touched a bit on this when it comes to Piac, that you do not really have that legal backing to enforce your recommendations. Or is it coordination challenges? Because you're calling on maybe Ghana Gas, you're calling on GMPC, you're calling on ministry. Do we have some challenge when it comes to that?
I think it's a combination of all the factors you've mentioned. In some of the recommendations, some of the agencies may not have the capacity to do it. So for instance, we are calling on the Petroleum Commission to exert effective partnership to ensure that they are able to acquire data, seismic data on Keta and other blocks. That requires capacity. We are also calling on them to do proper cost auditing. Those requires capacity. Others too requires lack of effective interagency coordination, which is between GMPC and GRA, which we've called and made recommendations countless times on this. Yeah. Others too include the fact that it is a constant ignore by some of the state agencies. And I think those are the ones that we need to crack the whip. If we can probably delineate the different recommendations as to why we think they've not been implemented, we should be able to move some of them to partner with other law enforcement agencies, and others too, we can provide a reason why some of them have not been implemented. But it's a combination of the multiple factors that you've mentioned. And I don't think it is right. Before, we used to recommend that projects should not be spread thinly. It looks like under the current government, they have lessened it. And then they are actually implementing all our petroleum revenues on one particular big legacy project. Mm-hmm. That is what we really wanted to see. Others too, you could notice that it's not capacity, it's not political will, it's nothing. They just decided not to talk about it because some of them may feel like it may distort what they already do. And I think with those ones too, we have to. So for Piac, we have to now start to differentiate between which of the recommendations that have not been implemented that is related to this reason and that reason. And I think from there, we'll be able to serve our viewers some of the reasons why these recommendations have not been implemented.
Are there any consequences if your recommendations are not implemented?
Because we are all trying to get efficient utilization of petroleum revenues, there are to some extent. If recommendations are not implemented and it leads to a loss, it's a loss to Ghana. And the citizens we represent would not take it lightly on us as Piac. And so whenever we go to the field, they tell us, Piac, why don't you get the powers to crack the whip to ensure that people are utilizing the petroleum revenues to the benefit of Ghanaians? Some of the projects are uncompleted. I think the better way is for the Ministry of Finance and Piac to work ideally to assess all those projects and see how much we can use to complete them. Otherwise, the monies have been wasted. And so if we're able to do that, it will help. So I think there may be consequences, and the consequences is that Ghana may continue to lose money. I think that's the biggest consequence.
So I'd want us to just touch on one more recommendation that I think Piac made with regards to the funding for Agenda 111. I think it's one of the recommendations that you made, I'm sure in the semi-annual, and then it might have featured in this annual. Has there been any new sort of funding, or do you have any update on the funding for Agenda 111, which used to be under GIFT?
I think we have to talk about a bit of a history.
Okay, sure, we can.
The Ghana Infrastructure Investment Fund was set up to undertake commercial-based projects. Under the previous government, they changed that particular mandate. And that particular mandate was to do socio-economic development rather than a pure commercial. We all knew that tackling 111 hospitals, we needed a huge revenue to do that. And even if you're going to use petroleum revenue, like we've recommended earlier, it is always advisable to start a project and finish it. If it was just 20 you could finish, they could have started 20 to finish them. Under this new government, we've made recommendations for the new government to consider allocating petroleum revenue. But as you know, their policy is big push. Their flagship is big push. So they want to put all the money into road construction. Any update I'm talking about here is what you and I may have seen in the media, that the president has promised to complete about 20 to 30% of the Agenda 111 project this year or next year, whilst they continue to search for monies to complete the rest. So that is a good news. However, we want all of them completed, given that we've already sunk some significant amount of petroleum revenues in there.
So let's touch a bit on accountability and oversight. So who has the ultimate responsibility to implement Piac's recommendations?
It should have been Piac and Parliament, but I would say Parliament has the ultimate responsibility to order agencies to implement these recommendations. And I think we should be working continuously with Parliament, though it hasn't worked very well, but we should continue as well. Whilst we probably, float the idea whether Piac really need to get the law to allow them to crack the whip. So that's another option. But I think Parliament should do. It doesn't stop us from also going straight to the office of the president to tell him that these are the recommendations we believe could help your government, but your ministries or agencies are refusing to implement. I think we can also take that approach. But for a more, let me say, sustainable way, Piac has to get that mandate to be able to crack the whip. And we have to be, that mandate should include, if you don't apply or implement this recommendation, you may not receive petroleum revenues in subsequent years.
How about civil society and the media?
The civil society and the media has always been our partners. In fact, they have worked with us more cordially than even some government agencies. For them, they can only let Ghanaians know and increase the public accountability demands on the agencies. But that is as far or the extent to which they can go. So we can also strengthen that particular public accountability demands, whereby citizens are aware that you are an MP, you are a minister, you are supposed to utilize petroleum revenue in this way. Piac has made these recommendations, and you've not done that. And as a result of that, Ghanaians are suffering. And we know how politicians take this very serious. When his or her constituency get to know, they rush to do some of these things. So the public accountability would also be quite significant if we're able to strengthen that as well.
But are citizens even aware of these recommendations?
We have them on Piac's website. I think we publish them every year. We have them in our report. Maybe going forward, we have to tease them out into cards. And we could also start using that and sharing that on WhatsApp so people can have it easily to know that this is the recommendations Piac have made. So
it's like all hope is not lost. You are still confident that your recommendations will be implemented?
I am confident that because, for instance, the current government is implementing what we have said legacy projects. So I am really confident and hopeful that most of these recommendations may be considered as well. Maybe Piac has to also push it through our engagement with our stakeholders.
So as we wrap up for today's edition of Time with Piac, I'll go back to my guest, Mr. Samuel Bekwe, in one sentence. So what must change to ensure that Piac's recommendations lead to real impact?
The only changes I would say that would crack the whip would be if you don't, as a ministry or agency, if you don't implement the recommendations, you will not be eligible to receive petroleum revenues in subsequent years. And I think that's one of the biggest things that could let it work. We have an example in Ghana. We call some fund development partners fund that goes to a district assembly. They call it District Development Fund, DDF. If you don't perform well, you don't receive the next year.
Okay.
And I think it has worked very well for the development partners. And you would see that district assemblies actually treat that particular fund separately and ensure that monies through that fund are able to deliver projects that are required to be delivered and complete them. So I think that is one of the biggest things. If we get that particular changes to the law, it will help.
So thank you very much, Mr. Samuel Bekwe. He was my guest for today's edition of Time with Piac, where we did an accountability check. And the question we asked was, are Piac's recommendations being implemented? So Mr. Samuel Bekwe is the chair of the technical subcommittee of Piac. So as we bring today's edition of Time with Piac to a close, we thank you for staying with us throughout this important conversation. So today's conversation has shed light on the critical role Piac plays in promoting transparency and accountability in the management and use of Ghana's petroleum revenues. We also explored the extent to which recommendations from Piac reports are being implemented, the challenges that continue to affect compliance, and the implications for national development. From my guest, Mr. Samuel Bekwe, we got to know that about 31% of Piac's recommendations have been implemented. While he says that is a success, we believe that more work has to be done. So this conversation does not end here. We encourage you to continue following Piac's work, engage with us, and help us hold duty bearers accountable in your communities. Once again, thank you for being part of Time with Piac. So until we come your way next month with another edition, continue to engage with us. Reach us via any of our platforms. Here on Facebook, we are on X, we are on Instagram, we are on LinkedIn at Piac Ghana. You can also send us a WhatsApp on 055-441-6544. I'm Jessica Champo. Thank you for spending your afternoon with us. Enjoy the rest of the day.